Hey, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. This is State of the Net Wireless. I really appreciate everybody coming, and I'm going to kick things off very quickly with a bit of housekeeping. We're live streaming today thanks to the Internet Society and Internet Society DC at stateofthenet.org/live. Pardon me? Okay. Okay, this is State of the Net Mobile, State of the Net Wireless, and feel free to use your mobile devices. And if you are tweeting, please use the hashtag #SOTNW. That's #SOTNW, and follow us at SOTN. So thanks for coming. I want to thank our sponsors, the Interactive Advertising Bureau and Comcast, for supporting this program, and we really appreciate their support. We're going to walk through a series of issues all related to wireless and mobile generally, and hopefully the program as it's stitched together makes sense from beginning to end. We're going to start off with some smart cities discussions, going into Internet of Things, coffee break, then we're going to look at whether advertising can fuel the growth of the mobile internet, and finally, conclude with whether or not there'll be enough bandwidth to actually make this all work. So there is a method to the madness, and just starting off right now, I'm going to introduce our moderator, Mr. John Horrigan, who's a senior researcher at Pew Research Center, and John is a fantastic person to do this. He has a huge amount of history with this issue, and he has a lot of actual personal research invested in it. So I'm going to hand it off to John and take it from there. Thanks, John.
Thank you very much, Tim. It's great to be here. We have a great panel before us on smart cities. To my right, we have Jeff Brueggeman from AT&T. To my left, Dan Correa from the White House, and to my far left, Deb Socia from Next Century Cities. We want to keep things conversational, but as we kick it off, it occurred to me this morning when I was thinking about the panel, I was thinking about a book that has probably been on the bookshelves of a few people in this room that's now approaching 20 years old in its first edition, which is The Death of Distance, which came out in 1997, which posited, among other things, that the internet, with all its connectivity, would be a distance killer. We'd be able to communicate and transact over large distances, and because the internet was a distance killer, it would make cities less important than they had been historically. It's a hypothesis the book put out there. It didn't necessarily endorse it, but it was something you would hear from time to time in the early days of the internet, the fact that it was a distance killer and might undercut some of the benefits of cities and densely packed urban spaces. However, I think time has proven that very much wrong. Today, density favors the internet in most of the ways that we care about. Density favors the deployment of high-speed networks. Density favors the development and use of new apps that can give life to all the bandwidth that is being installed, and this is either wireline or wireless bandwidth. And density favors the user, as there's a long-held truism about the notion of network effects in the adoption and use of new technologies. So density favors the internet, which means cities favor the internet these days. So we're going to talk about smart cities and how some emerging applications can be of great benefits to how urban spaces operate. And I hope also that we get into some of the potential pitfalls and frictions in turning very promising technologies and applications into reality. So the way we're going to proceed is just let each of the panelists speak for a few minutes to set out each of his or her ideas, and then we're going to open it up to discussion amongst us up here, and if we have time, get a few questions from the audience. So first, I'm going to turn to Jeff Brueggeman, then we'll go to Dan, then we'll let Deb from Boston, since the Red Sox are playing at this moment, bat cleanup. So.
Okay, I will lead off. Thanks, John. I just thought I'd give a little bit of an introduction of what is smart cities, and we really view it as an integrated set of solutions, some of which have been around for a while, everything from fleet management to managing the water system to transportation. There are a lot of pieces that have been out there already, but what really is creating the excitement is to be able to pull things together into an integrated solution. And as John was kind of alluding to, take advantage of a city being able to package together all the solutions into something that really is going to energize the cost reduction benefits, the citizen engagement benefits, the infrastructure benefits into a holistic strategic plan. So at AT&T, we really started to see this happening last year, and back in September, AT&T created a dedicated smart cities division within our company to really take advantage of it. And it coincided very nicely with the White House launching a major smart cities initiative, which I know Dan is going to talk about. So we're really, in order for this to work, you really need both the industry and state, local governments with the assistance of the federal government to be working together. And that's been one of the really major trends that we've seen is intense collaboration among a wide variety of types of companies, large and small. I think Dan mentioned that one of the benefits of a smart cities platform is that you can have innovative apps running on top of it. So there is a huge benefit to be gained by large companies being able to provide the infrastructure to manage data across the city, but there's also a lot of innovation that can be built on top of that. And in order for smart cities to really fully reach their potential, I think we need to be addressing both ends of the spectrum. So what have we seen over the past few months as things have really started to galvanize? One is, in order to make the smart cities function, we break it down into, first you have to have secure connectivity, and that isn't just wireless, although wireless is a huge component of it. It may be on the AT&T cellular network, it may be over Wi-Fi, but it also may be over fiber or some other type of wireline broadband. And you need connectivity that's going to connect all the devices in the city. Then you need a really robust technology platform to manage all the data. And I think that's something that maybe doesn't get talked about enough is the city is becoming a major information management entity by embarking on smart cities. And they've got to have security built in. They've got to be able to have cloud storage and secure connectivity to their cloud storage. And then they can build the apps and the uses on top of it. So in order to make this work, you really then on the government side need to bridge the silos that have often existed. So City of Dallas has more than 70 entities across it. So in order to have an integrated smart cities program, you need to be able to manage things across. And that's one of the areas where I think some of the federal pilot programs are really going to have a positive impact, because we have to be able to work with cities in a coordinated way to develop a strategic plan. And one example I like to highlight is right in our own backyard here is Montgomery County, Maryland. Has Dan Hoffman is the Chief Innovation Officer for the county, Montgomery County, and we are partnering with one of them as our pilot cities. I think that's a great example of, this is a new type of thinking for cities and municipalities to think about having a Chief Innovation Officer, but it really shows a change of mindset that they're going through as well. So those are the kind of underlying pillars that we need for smart cities. How do we get smart cities rolling? There's a little bit of a chicken and the egg challenge that you can have here. And I think it's a combination of good commercial strategies to help make this as easy as possible for the cities. So we are working to help participate in pilot programs we're up to 5 cities now: Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas, Montgomery County, and Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And what we're trying to do is to actually actively work with them to help develop their strategic plans, as well as provide the infrastructure. And I think we'll be seeing a lot more of that, and a lot of what Dan's going to talk about, that I think a positive aspect of what the White House and the federal government is doing is not just providing some funding for the pilot programs, but really encouraging that collaboration and showing through some pilot programs that if you get the right set of companies and government officials in a room and develop that technology plan, just like a good economic development plan, you will really advance the interests of smart cities. And then my other comment would be, we have to think about how to make this politically a valuable thing for the cities to embark on. And we hosted the governor of Atlanta, Kasim Reed, and he said, I've got to be able to show my taxpayers why we're doing this. And I think that's a combination of good measurement to show the cost reduction benefits of smart cities, as well as consumer type applications, whether it's being able to show better information about traffic patterns, or being able to create applications that will allow citizens to engage more with their municipality or local government. Those are the types of things that are going to make these sustainable over the long haul. So really excited about the progress that's being made, but there is a heavy policy component to taking what is, I think, technology-wise ready to really take off and make it a success.
Perfect segue over to Dan, who's been heavily involved in a new White House report on smart cities and the role of technology in cities. So over to you, Dan.
Thanks very much, John. It's terrific to be here and talking about smart cities, because I think this is a very important issue. So I'm here to talk about our Smart Cities initiative that we launched out of the White House last September with an initial investment of over $160 million in research and technology partnerships. And I think that there's really two important parts of this conversation. The first is on the technology side. So investments in ensuring that we have a strong pipeline of new technologies in this area, continuing to flow. And this is a core part of what the federal government does. But the second piece is one that I think is very important to focus on, especially for this conversation. And that's around technology deployment and overcoming some of the barriers and challenges. And we think the federal government has an important role in helping cities to do this and in working with other stakeholders. So I have a question for the audience, actually. How many people here have actually worked in a city or are currently working in a city? Terrific. How many people are currently in the city, actually? Great, okay, so we've got a good mix. Because I think something that we forget, those of us that aren't currently in the city, and I've spent some time working in cities myself, is that the challenges that we're talking about, I think bringing the imagined future of what a smart city looks like, where we're all plugged in a variety of ways and getting services delivered instantaneously, and traffic and public transit are all linked up and optimized. That's hard to do, right? There are immense challenges to delivering that future locally. And I think the people that are working on cities trying to bring that future to life face a terrific uphill battle. And we're seeing some really great innovation, but the progress is necessarily incremental. So I just want to say that up front, because I think that is what drives our thinking about how we get to the future of smart cities where technology, and as we define it, we're thinking about Internet of Things / cyber-physical systems, data analytics, cloud computing, where these types of IT technologies are helping citizens to solve the pressing challenges that they face. And those can be across all areas, but really that's the definition that we're using. So I think that our investments are focused, are focused on the technology R&D side, but with a heavy emphasis on deployment. And I'll just give and deployment, and also I should add coalition building and creating the right test beds and pilots. So I'll just give a few examples, and I'd look forward to talking more about this in the discussion. So one example of marrying the research and development with deployment is the National Science Foundation, as part of our initiative, is providing $3 million to fund the deployment of the Array of Things, a project coming out of University of Chicago that is putting 500 sensor nodes across Chicago and now other cities as well that are equipped with power, internet, et cetera, and to monitor environmental conditions, take that data in and analyze it and derive new insights. That's one example where this is part of the research and R&D, but it's also developing learnings for Chicago, the city, right? That's on the research side. An example I would give on the technology test bedding and deployment side is the Department of Transportation's recently announced Smart City Challenge, where they have put a significant amount of money on the table and asked cities, to come up with their own vision for what the next generation transportation system should look like, using Internet of Things, using autonomous vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the key here is this is a new way to do federal funding. It's significant resources where a city is actually coming up with their own ideas. So that solicitation is out. It's in the process. There's 7 finalists that the Department of Transportation has named, and we're eagerly awaiting the announcement of a finalist in the coming months. But I think it's important because a solicitation like that really puts the ball in the court of the cities and recognizes that they're going to be the ones that know their own problems best, and we're actually going to see creative ideas coming out of that process. And then so the last thing I'd mention as part of our initiative that was announced at the White House in September is new public-private partnerships that we see where city leaders are coming together with others. And one example I'll give is the Metro Lab Network, which was announced with over 25 initial mayors and their local corresponding research universities to come together and partner up, where the universities are using R&D dollars to develop new technologies and providing technical assistance to cities to help solve some of these pressing challenges. So 2 examples of the kinds of university-city collaborations that are a part of that network. The first is South Bend in Notre Dame, where technology coming out of Notre Dame allowed South Bend to deploy smart sensors to help manage their combined sewer overflow in South Bend. The estimated savings of this technology, rather than going with a traditional infrastructure build-out, is approximately $100 million, which is massive, right? And the amount of investment that it took was very, very small. Another example is where Carnegie Mellon has collaborated with Pittsburgh, deploying smart traffic lights that are linked up in the downtown area. And the results of those initial pilots were a reduction of commute times during rush hour by more than 25%, which is really significant. So I think we're seeing a lot of these really exciting examples. Just to emphasize, I think the challenge is how do we scale these up? How do we get to the next level? How do we link them together? And I look forward to that conversation. And I also think that there are a number of other things that I can mention that we, the White House, and we, the federal government, are doing to help unlock some of that, to make this future where we're more efficient, more effective, more productive cities become a reality.
Great. Over to Deb, who I hope will talk about something that Dan mentioned toward the end, which is scaling up and deploying widely to lots of cities, not just the several examples Dan mentioned.
I'm Deb Socia from Next Century Cities, and we're a nonprofit that helps cities that have or want to have fast, affordable, reliable broadband. And honestly, we don't care how they get there. So our cities are municipal builds or public-private partnerships, open access networks, working with a currently existing provider. But if any of these things are going to work, we have to have the infrastructure. And so that's a really important starting place, and a lot of our cities are struggling to figure that out. So we do an awful lot of work to help them figure it out, and help them with policies, help them understand how to work with partners, help introduce them to other people doing similar work so that they can learn from others' successes and failures. So we work with 133 cities and counties across the country, representing 27 million Americans. So there's clearly a need, and we hope that we are fulfilling that need. And our city leaders really do care. It was so nice to hear you all talking about how important those cities are in this process. And the city leaders care deeply, and they care deeply for all the reasons we know. They care about economic development, which is the one we talk about a lot, but there's a lot more than that. It's education, it's transportation, it's public safety, it's all of the things we think about. And one of the things we care deeply about is helping our cities think about civic participation and participatory democracy. And so we actually also have a project that we are awarding 3 cities with $30,000 and some technical and some policy support to help them create opportunities for civic engagement to be enhanced through the use of technology. That's an area we haven't seen as much interest in, and we hope we spur that through this effort. Today, I am a Boston person, so you can't live in Boston and not love the Red Sox. Sorry, but I do. I live here now, but I can't ever give up my Red Sox. But today is actually a really important day because it is the day of the 120th Boston Marathon. And I did live in Boston during the bombing 3 years ago, and that was a really interesting sort of experience understanding how technology changed that. The outcome changed because of technology. People were able to find their family members, people who were displaced all over the city, got on Facebook, said, I'm okay. I mean, all the ways we use technology. The opportunity to take video that people and pictures people had taken on their phones and take that along with video from all the cameras on the businesses around, helped them expedite the solution. And I was there and I could follow what was happening in the moment on Twitter. I knew where not to be and where I should be and what I could do. And what happened because of that was that the city figured out that we should really be coordinating this, right? This shouldn't just be a random, this happened and here's how we responded to this. And they were pretty successful. But so the next big event in the city, they actually had a whole dashboard. They had all the video coming in, all the audio feed. They had a way to communicate beyond the different small silos that tend to happen in cities. And so it was incredibly successful. And that's the kind of thing that I think we're going to see more and more and more of. And the cities are really being the innovators in regard to this. I think the big trick is for our cities to balance that need to share data with the need to protect privacy and the need to keep that data secure. And our cities worry about all of those things. So, there are a couple of examples of some really interesting innovations that are meant to help, one in particular meant to help with public safety. So there are now opportunities in public transportation to not just take video, but audio as well. That just feels odd to me, that my personal conversation, not just my picture, is now being transmitted. And I think in part we have all these great ideas and they have potentially wonderful outcomes, but we've always got to think too, what are the problems that come with those outcomes? And as a city, you have to measure that. And I think that's a tricky place to be because we just haven't figured out the policies and procedures that we need to have in place to protect that privacy. At the same time, we are enhancing opportunities and enhancing the quality of life. So I'm going to tell you quickly about a couple of really cool things that we're seeing our cities do. So in Louisville, Ted Smith, who's the Chief of Civic Innovation, and I love those new titles as well. That's really powerful. They had an issue with really high asthma rates, and so he put sensors all over the city and could figure out using GPS where all the issues were and through how many people were going to the hospital or calling for ambulances, and then got more data from NASA about, I want to say this right, nitrogen dioxide rates within the city, and could use all of that data together to determine where in the city were there problems so they could be more precise in addressing it. And they also did something similar with their traffic. They stopped paying all the money they had previously been paying with the pneumatic road tubes to get traffic data, and they just pay for Google real-time data. And so they're able to figure out not just once a year, but in the moment, where are the traffic problems in our city. Boston has one called Citizens Connect, one of my favorites. And my favorite story with that, a woman called into the Public Works Department and said, hey, I really need a new recycling sticker for my bucket outside. And so they called to the guy that, sent a text to the guy that does that, and he happened to be around the corner, showed up in 5 minutes. The woman opened the door and said, oh my goodness, am I on TV? Like, she called, and within 5 minutes they could respond. Being able to make those changes, it really enhances the quality of life in the city. They have another one called Speed Bump that you can download to your phone, and it uses your accelerometer to figure out where all the potholes and the risings are, and they were able to immediately respond with more efficiency because they had previously only been able to get that data once a year. And so now they get it in the moment all year. Santa Monica is another one of my favorites. If you haven't been, it's a beautiful city, but parking is painful. And so they have an app in Santa Monica that can help you find an empty parking place. I think what you had said was so true, Dan, and that's that they identify the problem they have that they're dealing with, and they determine how they're going to move forward and how technology can enhance that solution. And at the same time, having to figure out how do we protect this data and how do we keep people safe.
Wonderful set of issues gotten on the table by each of the speakers. And as I listen, I wonder about uneven adoption of these tools, meaning, to take the Louisville example, you have a guy like Ted Smith who's just talented and passionate and able to affect change. What of the frictions and barriers in wide-scale deployment of not just the technologies, but the mindset that says, let's use these technologies for specific purposes? Can anybody give examples of where there have been real struggles, real frictions in trying to bring life to these ideas in cities, and what was done to overcome them, if anything? Anybody have a notion about that?
I'd say number one is, do we have the infrastructure, right? Which a lot of our cities are struggling to figure out. And that sometimes becomes a hot potato issue in the city, right? Do we build it ourselves? Do we partner? How do we make it happen? It's a high cost for a lot of our more rural communities. And so I think that's the first one. And I think additionally, there are sometimes political challenges, right? So one of our principles is that, broadband is nonpartisan, right? This is not a partisan issue, and it is never partisan at the local level. And I think there are times when it does become partisan at other levels, and that becomes a real trial for our cities to resolve. So if you live in a state where it doesn't allow you to make that local choice, that becomes problematic for you if there are no other alternatives.
Yeah, I would add, I think, so there's two issues here. One is about digital divide issues within and across communities. And that's something that we've spent a lot of time working on in this administration. Most recently, our announcements around Connect Home and Connect All, which I think are powerful opportunities for increasing connectivity among low-income housing populations. And then I think but I think that the other issue is around how do we get, if we're in a position where we have early adopters that are taking significant new steps, forging pilots. I think there's a number of issues that are required in order to share those learnings. So first of all, we do have this laboratories of democracy phenomenon going on, which is exciting because we don't know in some areas what works. And so there's learnings to derive. So I think there's a huge opportunity for improved knowledge sharing in this area. But the first thing I would point to that we see it work well is that it's been leadership, that there's somebody who has a vision. Oftentimes it might be a mayor or a city manager, or just somebody who is given the purview of working across different city departments. And maybe it's a head of civic innovation, maybe it's a chief innovation officer. But oftentimes it's just somebody who's dedicated to thinking about this. And this is something that we see in the federal government as well. So we struggle with this, and so it's close to my heart.
Yeah, I completely agree that infrastructure is the foundation for everything, and obviously that's something that AT&T cares enormously about, and we invest billions of dollars in that infrastructure. But the cities and regions that I think are getting the advantage right now are those that make it as easy as possible for that investment, and that can be eliminating regulatory barriers, that can be really embracing this public-private partnership. And I think one of the exciting things to me about cities is it's having the cities use their purchasing power in a more coordinated way than maybe we've seen before, to say, hey, I may have 70 different agencies doing 70 different things with ICT, but if I band together and really look at how I can create an integrated platform, it creates a very powerful effort, not only within the government crossing those silos, but what you do is you bring industry to the table as well. So I think, and I really do applaud the White House approach here, I do think, and you kind of touched on it, Dan, as part of this is really showing the collaboration and how that can work. And I think if we get some of the pilot programs here, it can help show the model for other places. I do think cities that have research institutions just inherently tend to have a leg up because they understand the value of the data and the research that can be associated with it. But there's no reason why even rural areas would not benefit from the same type of approach. I think the other thing that we on the industry side need to do is to make the technology more accessible to state and local government. So we are trying to deploy dashboards so they can see the data and see what's happening and have better visibility, and doing things like security services and things to consult with them on these practical issues that I think can be a daunting task and a possible deterrent. So we need to make it as easy as possible to make the technology transition too.
So it sounds like it's a digital readiness problem that has to be conquered, both the skills to get governments to understand this is important, go do it. And then I think an issue that we touched on is trust, not just data security, but I think, and you'll read about this particularly when it comes to minority and low-income communities, trust in the flow of data that will be out there about individuals, about households, and whether actually participating in this brave new world is a risk for an individual. Anybody have comment on that, or, including even data caps and consumption of data, which you need to do to use some of these systems? I don't know. Deb?
Sure. I think that folks who are very low income are disproportionately impacted by data caps, first of all. I really worry about how that impacts folks. Because if you have to choose between your child using that phone because it's your only internet connection so they can do some work for homework, or applying for a job, or paying a bill, or connecting in some other way, that's really a deterrent to full adoption. And so there are some great adoption programs out there that we've seen across the country, and certainly ConnectEd and the potential changes to Lifeline could have a real impact here. But cities like Boston have done it well, and Austin, Chattanooga, Davidson, North Carolina, Seattle, Portland, they've really made a concerted effort to address that issue and to address the issue of home access with their families so that their only access is not that phone. Because they've got to find fixed wireless in order to not go over their data cap. And so how are we helping people think about this in a different way? And what is the role of cities? And so I think that it's a partnership dealing with this issue. It can't just be the city, it can't just be the nonprofits, it can't just be providers. It's really got to be a collective effort in order to address the problem of digital equity within a community.
Yeah, I disagree that data caps are inherently disadvantaging any community. I think they actually, our goal is to provide as many different types of choices for different users so that some aren't forced to cross-subsidize what others are doing. But linking it back to smart cities, I actually think, there are opportunities for innovative service models where you may get the connectivity included in the Internet of Things service. So, cities can actually provide the services and provide the connectivity with that service on behalf of the citizen. So it's not necessarily the case that everything the user does is going to be on their own plan. So I think maximum flexibility and some innovation here is really going to be what is going to help people.
And I don't disagree at all.
Dan, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think that, so these are complicated issues and they will be worked out over time. I think one of the things that we do see in this area is obviously cities are reluctant to make significant investments on things that are speculative or long-term, or yet without a clearly proven ROI. So there's a real appetite for interesting and novel business models. And I think there are some things that some interesting ideas like Link NYC is one, where New York City has partnered with a bunch of companies to create to provide municipal Wi-Fi essentially. Over the next 10 years, they're hoping to reach the entire city. So, and that's ad supported, and it's a model that I think is an interesting one. And that it's actually one that, as they were initially standing this up, they worked with NIST at the federal level, that runs the Global City Teams Challenge that actually AT&T is a big supporter of. But this is one of the projects that was participating in the NIST Global City Teams Challenge that is devoted to sharing best practices among communities.
We are nearly out of time on this panel. As we wind up, I want to just make a couple of observations. One is, I think we've gotten a wonderful overview of the exciting potential for smart cities, and not just potential, some of the things that are going on that each of the speakers has highlighted. It's very exciting to get a view into what's happening and what's coming down the pike. The second observation I would make would be the uncontroversial one, which is smart cities require smart people. And we've talked a good bit about collaboration, trust, scaling things up. Those require a set of skills that aren't necessarily technical, but require the hard work of coordination, collaboration between industry and the private sector. And I think with the set of players we have on the stage, a coalition of cities, the White House driving change from the federal level, AT&T, an example of the private sector working in partnership with cities to make these things happen, is very encouraging. And finally, I want us all to thank each of our panelists for their time today. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.